Okay, so basically, I've been talking about Coho for a while, and it just seemed like a good opportunity to talk about uh, how they actually got here. So hold on a second, I just lost my little page here. There it is. There it was. Okay, am I still up there?
Yeah, we can still see your cover page.
Cool. Okay, so let's get started. I'm also going to talk a little bit about lamprey and Chinook. I was going to talk about cutthroat, but I don't. These other things are going to take more than enough time, so I will save the cutthroat for another time. So
Sounds good.
um,
Thanks.
we're basically. I want to start with basic fish management here. We're gonna go ahead and Um, we're going to start at the bottom. Okay, so we have a fish facility down at Willamette Falls, and it's sitting on the Sullivan plant there for PGE. It's this fish counting facility, and so we can monitor, especially salmonids coming through the Willamette Falls through three different fish ladders. There's one that comes up in the cul-de-sac over here by the Sullivan plant, and then there's two more entrances. They all meet at the top up here at the counting facility. And so we count Chinook, we count lamprey, everything that comes through there. This is a hatchery spring Chinook salmon coming through in July. You can see there's a whole wad of lamprey down here that are working their way up river also. Um, the counting facility is actually sits right here, and again, this is another look at the fish ladder entrances from a different perspective. Um, we have video on there that runs 24/7. We count every fish that comes through. And just for your information, we had a wonderful lady, Debbie Ames, who was our fish counter at Willamette Falls for the last 35 years. And she has just now retired, which is, she did just a wonderful job. And I hate to see her go. Anyway, the we do have all three fish ladders converging at the top up there through that video station, and we also have pit tag detectors in there for any fish that happen to have a pit tag in them. Pit tag, for those of you who don't know, is like that thing that you put in your dog or your cat, so that if it gets lost, you can get a number and they can track you down. But we do the same thing with fish. So this is a another fish that we are beginning to count. It's coho salmon. And if you notice these coho coming through here, this is in October of this year, they all have adipose fins. And there's going to be a little jack that comes through right there. And that little guy's only been out in the ocean for a short period of time before it came back, probably less than 6 months. Um, those coho are not necessarily native to the upper Willamette Basin. And we're starting to count a lot of them. So this is the counts of coho over the last 60 years or so. And you can see that there were pretty good runs in the early 70s there, and then they dropped off to practically nothing, less than 2,000 fish in the 90s. And then in the early 2000s, we started seeing coho again. And again, they all had adipose fins on them. So that was of great interest to both anglers and biologists because there weren't any hatchery releases being made anymore. And here we had these fish coming back. So with that, I kind of want to give you a history of coho salmon above Willamette Falls. This is the Willamette Basin. Prior to 1885, there were no coho upstream from Willamette Falls. We don't have any records of them. The falls themselves, as you can see in this picture, is passable only for salmonids only at high water, and that's why we have spring chinook and winter steelhead that come in so late in the springtime. It's a magic time where the water is high enough, it kind of floods out the falls a little bit, and the water temperature starts coming up, and the fish can pass to some extent. During the fall, these falls are straight up and down, 20-foot plus jump, and just no access for fish to get up over the falls. Much lower flow, of course. That changed in 1885. There was a navigation canal that was built to get boats upstream from Willamette Falls. And along with that came a fish ladder that was built right beside it. This was the first time that salmonids had access to the upper river at all months of the year. And another one was reconstructed. I think the latest one was like 1971, but basically a pretty good fish ladder for back in 1885. And by the 1930s, they were seeing a few coho show up in the lower Willamette River, various tributaries down there in low numbers. Well, our old Fish Commission, which is it's commercial fisheries end of fisheries management for the state, did a big job of releasing millions and millions of coho fry, and those were the sub-yearlings, and then and smolts, the yearlings and adults, into the Willamette River above Willamette Falls. These were mostly done in the 1950s through the 1970s. They continued on a little bit into the 80s, and then in one river into the 90s. So lots of fish released. And here is the areas that they were released into. Includes the main stem Willamette, the Tualatin, Molalla, Yamhill, Rickrell Creek, both Stanniams, north and south, Lucky Mute, Calapooya, Marys, and Long Tom, and pretty good numbers into both the McKenzie River, which included the Mohawk River, and the Coast Fork, Middle Fork Basin. So you can see there was, 14 million fish released just up here in this upper area. Again, most of those releases were in the 50s to the 70s. And if you look at the fish counts again, those large numbers of fish released ended in the late 80s. But then the fish just disappeared, more or less, until this new period of natural reproduction fish started showing up. So this was of interest to a lot of folks. And in 2009, we got together a bunch of folks, including the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, PGE, Eugene Water and Electric Board was involved, the Corps of Engineers, Tualatin Watershed Council, and University of Idaho. And there was a pretty good number of tags put out, 80 in 2009, and then a more comprehensive study was done in 2014 with 219 tags. So the purpose of this was basically to find out where the heck these coho were going, what kind of distribution we had in the tributary streams, what was their spawning timing. Coho are there's an early run, late run. The genetics that make up those early and late runs are different. And so we wanted to see what kind of which fish we actually had in the basin up here. And then, try and figure out some management options. These fish are not native up here, so what do you do with them? And use this study or these studies for coming up with more comprehensive studies to come up with some good management alternatives. So the first study in 2009 took advantage of a lamprey study that was going on with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and they had 11 receivers set up throughout the Willamette Basin, and they're independent. A couple of Yagis out there pointing different directions to try and pick up the radios going by, solar powered and battery operated. So that was handy to have that already set up for lamprey, and all we had to do was put some radio tags out there. And those of you who know Tom Murtaugh, there's one that he's putting it back into the river. It's got a radio receiver in it. This is the antenna coming out. The radio receiver or the radio tag is actually slid down their gullet to the back of the stomach. And then, of course, these fish aren't eating while they're in fresh water. And it just sits there, and we actually recover quite a number of these tags after the fish have spawned and died off. So then the 2014 radio tracking study, like I say, was a little bit more comprehensive. They had 54 fixed site radio receivers, and again, 219 radio tag coho went out. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts of what those two studies found. Most of those fish, almost half of the fish, were going into the Yamhill, and it's a big system. A lot of fish, a lot of coho habitat up there, but the Tualatin also has quite a bunch of habitat. 20% of the tributary coho ended up in the Tualatin. It's a little bit uncanny that both studies came up so equal, and especially in the big streams there, or the big percentage streams. So we also had fish in the Santiam and all the way up to the Lucky Mute. What you notice here is that above the Lucky Mute, I don't have anything. That's because there weren't any coho that went upstream from the Lucky Mute. So if you look at it in another perspective, this is where the coho are in the Willamette Basin in 2014. So we got them we had them in the South Santiam, North Santiam, Lucky Mute, Rickreall, Yamhill, Tualatin, Molalla, and Pudding Complex. And again, here's the percentages. Some of them are, there's 11% of the fish were never found outside of the Willamette River itself. But, a little bit of fish here, there, and everywhere on the tributaries downstream, Santiam and downstream. So you notice there's nothing up here in the Upper Willamette. And of course, this is what I've been talking about here the last couple of years. This is a little video of the right bank fish ladder in October 2023. And that is a male coho. You can see the white gum line there, and he's heading upriver. Good looking fish, pretty big fish too. And so in 2023, we ended up with about 50. Well, we think there were about 54 that we can account for. There might have been more because we didn't have that ladder actually operating during this time of the year, or these days anyway. But you notice that all of them were in October. So we took that into account and said maybe we ought to check out where they went. And if you look at the distribution now, that year we also found fish in the Marys, and in 2023 we had the largest jack run we've ever seen at Willamette Falls. So we were preparing for a big run of coho in 2024, and we decided that maybe we should have some radio tags available to try and track where those guys go when they come up above Leeburg Dam. So there's actually a pretty good relationship between jacks and adult coho. So this is it. That R squared value is pretty high, and this is the prediction that we had for 2024. We had the highest number of jacks that we'd ever seen, almost over 11,000, and that at the time ran the regression came out to a little over 40,000 adults that we expected this year. Well, we got 53,000 this year. So it was a little bit bigger than expected. And when we saw that run coming back and we saw how many fish were coming, we wondered whether or not the 30 tags that we had for radio tagging was going to be enough. So, but we were prepared. And this is what we saw. A coho going through Leeburg Ladder, but that was on November 9th. We had gone all the way through October without seeing and trapping every fish that was coming up the river and didn't see a single coho. And so we shut down the trapping operation at the end of October. And then this poor lonely guy came through the first couple of weeks of November. That was the only coho that showed up this year out of all 53,000 adults that came over Willamette Falls. So that was, I guess, it wasn't exactly disappointing, but at the same time, we kind of wanted to do a little radio tracking project. So again, here's the predictor. We have another good run of jacks that came up this year. It's the second highest number of jacks that we've seen. This was the number of jacks, back in this year or last year. And so that comes out to about 30,000 coho for next year. Not a bad number, but it'll be interesting to see if any of them show up in the McKenzie. So it's kind of, this is kind of my summary on coho. It's a long summary, but we'll give it to you. So we kind of expect coho to continue some pretty good runs in the Willamette. There's a lot of habitat down there. They measured almost 250 miles of habitat just in the Tualatin Basin, and remember that Tualatin is number 2 on the list for production. The Yamhill being the highest production. So this is an example of, I think this is in the Tualatin, one of the spawning streams up there, and really, really good coho habitat. We found juveniles everywhere, and all the way up to the Calapooya. They were even in the main stem Willamette, fairly thick, and it's actually big numbers. They measured in Tualatin and the Yamhill in 2010, 11, somewhere in there, 1 fish per meter squared. That's of juveniles, and that's a lot when you start looking at fish numbers in a stream. There's reasons for that. There's a lot of wood in these streams. The 1994 Forest Practices Act certainly had a big change in terms of how streams were managed in private forest areas. And so we think we're getting a lot more large wood being recruited to those streams and being left in those streams. And also there's a lot of riparian floodplain projects going on. And obviously we've got some great ones in the McKenzie that are not being used by Coho yet. But downstream there, they probably are using a lot in the lower Willamette. Another thing that is pretty cool, and Coho and beavers really get along well together. Beavers provide great rearing habitat in their ponds for Coho, and because we have a pretty good sized beaver population, we're getting a lot of habitat created by our natural engineers. There's also a lot of there are vestigial floodplain and foothill marshes, sloughs, and backwaters that are available to Coho rearing up there that don't need beavers to create them, but they're there, create a lot of habitat. There are some benefits to Coho. I mean, 60,000 Coho coming over, that's a lot of sacks of fertilizer swimming up the river, and that's got to provide something for production of fish in the Willamette. But these blue lines here are spring Chinook spring Chinook rearing areas, places where they get to, and they are overlapping a lot down in the Santiam and the Molalla Pudding, of course in the McKenzie, with potential Coho habitat. We don't know what the consequences of having those Coho are up here. There's going to be some probably red superimposition. There's going to be competition for rearing habitat for the juveniles. And, you know, you can't imagine that it's going to be all pluses for the Chinook. And if you look at this area here, I just don't know why there aren't any Coho up there in the lower Long Tom, the Coast Fork, or the Middle Fork. It looks like good Coho habitat, especially in the lower elevations, but as far as we've seen so far, they're not here. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of benefits to fisheries. In the lower river there's a lot of fish being caught, and they are taking advantage of that run as it's here, and it's growing. You know, there's a lot of boats down there on the lower Willamette, fishing the mouths of the tributaries, especially the Tualatin and the Yamhill, and also both Santiams, but mostly the North Santiam. So why are they booming? Well, again, a lot of habitat. All that green stuff you see on this map right here is kind of lowland areas that is pretty good Coho habitat. And you notice that we get into transition zone up here in the Coast Fork and Middle Fork, McKenzie, and maybe not quite so good Coho habitat. One thing that is probably a huge plus for these fish is the reduction in harvest out in the ocean. A lot of the fisheries out there now are adipose fin marked only, and so the unmarked fish are getting by without being harvested, and so that's a boon to these fish. Dosing conditions are also pretty darn good for Coho out there. They tend to be a little bit more nearshore fish. They take advantage of the upwelling a little bit better. They don't move quite so far in the ocean as like spring Chinook that go all the way up into the Gulf of Alaska. They tend to be more homebodies staying off the Oregon, California, Washington coast. Not all of them, but they tend that way. And we probably have benefited from having some additional flow in the main stem Willamette River due to the Willamette project biological opinion for the Corps of Engineers. Like I talked about earlier, there's probably some genetic mixing that has taken place, and these fish have found their niche, so to speak, in the lower Willamette and are benefiting from evolution, basically. And we think that the water quality is getting better, but global warming is still here. So I'm going to kind of wrap up the Coho stuff here. A lot of fish coming back. These numbers here are off the chart, and 30,000 if we get it next year is still a pretty good run. It's just it's a new management era that we have to look at. So even though they aren't native up here, this is wild reproduction that's going on, and it is they are creating their own thing. We did have Coho and Chinook coexisting in the Willamette downstream from the falls, and of course we have it on the coast. They've grown up together over the years. So right now we're planning on radio tagging in 2025. We kind of bombed out in 2024, and we're also going to be looking for juvenile coho in the river, because we had both males and females come up river, over 50 of them last year, and last year being 2023, not 2024. So we'll try it again. So that's any questions on Coho?
We can't see the whole screen of everybody, so I guess go ahead and speak up.
Yep.
Bob? You're on mute, Bob. Bob, you're still on mute.
Jeff, any idea on why they came up in 23? Was it all those fish came out, and there's great habitat up there for spawning, and we had a pretty good run last year, but they didn't really make it. I only know of 2 fish caught in actually Fleaberg Dam.
No, I can do a lot of guessing, and we've certainly done that. One of the things that we thought last year that might have contributed to the McKenzie getting those fish was the heavy siltation of both the Sandy M system and the Middle Fork system. And maybe the McKenzie was, a clean water spot on the horizon that they turned into. So that was one. We did have a big run last year, and so those fish were moving up through an area with probably more scent coming down than they've ever smelled before, with all that heavy sediment in the main stem Willamette. And who knows, maybe that gave them a little spark to go to a different spot. Remember, it's only about 50 fish though, and that run last year was 45,000 or so, including the jacks. And so it's a pretty small percentage of the total that actually came up here. It was just surprising to see them.
So Jeff, 10 or 15 years ago, there was a project called the Oregon Plan. I think Governor Kitzhaber took the at least the leadership, the titular leadership of the program, which was designed, as I understand it, wasn't living here then, specifically to target coho habitat. Is this any way a possible delayed response? You already talked about the improvement in Oregon Forest Practices Act that occurred about that time. So is this a delayed response to that initiative?
Yeah, you could look at it that way, in that the Oregon plan was really designed for the coastal coho populations and really benefited them. Obviously, the same plan was implemented statewide, and we were looking at trying to improve habitat and water conditions for all species in the Willamette. And it could be ancillary to that, but that certainly comes into play. And there's no doubt that that adipose fin mark fishery only comes into play big time.
Yeah. Great presentation.
Cool. Well, I got more.
Good.
Jeff,
How we doing for time, Jared?
we're doing great. We started about 15 minutes early on the presentation, so time's fine. We still got. Yeah.
Hey, Jeff,
Okay.
this week, can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
What do you foresee of a sport fishery on these fish, being as they're having an adipose?
Well, our regulations are set up that upstream from the falls you can harvest any coho, hatchery or not. So we don't plan on changing that.
Okay.
The coho downstream from Willamette Falls are actually on the endangered species list. And so it's a little bit unfortunate that this big run of coho is coming through that area. The Willamette Falls fishery would probably be very good for these fish, but they can't harvest the unmarked fish.
Jeff, are they running up the clackamas too, or is that not suiting them?
No, there is a coho run up the Clackamas. It's actually a pretty good one. PG's done some really good work up there in the upper basin, and they've got some great fish passage going on now, and they've got some runs that are coming back in pretty good numbers. So neat stuff.
I have a question. Are the coho a more exploratory fish? I mean, I think of salmon as coming back to where they started. Are they different that way, or it just so happened that or why, is there anything there that makes them different?
That's a great question. That's coho seem to have, and over the years, they've done some studies on coho to determine their how well they home to their natal streams, and there always seems to be around a 5% stray rate on them, and so it's a great evolutionary trait to have, to be able to, in case your stream gets blown out, to have an ability to go find another stream. And it also mixes the genetics up between streams, which is usually a good thing for genetic diversity. So, yeah.
What's the stray rate of a Chinook?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I do know the coho is around 5%.
Mhm.
So.
Jeff,
Okay. Go ahead.
Are coho better able to utilize shallow spawning grounds and smaller tributaries and go up higher in them too, the coho?
Absolutely. Yeah, they tend to spawn in the same general areas that steelhead would make it to. So it's they are a smaller stream salmon than our Chinook. Our Chinook like big streams.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up on the Coho section.
Okay.
Jeff, really appreciate that. If you want to just go ahead and move on, that'd be
Okay.
yeah,
We're
we're
going
doing
to
pretty good
work
on
back.
time. We got about 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, we'll make it easy then.
Great.
So this is another picture at Willamette Falls. Chinook run coming through. You can see one wild fish, nice big one there. The rest of them are hatchery fish. So that's about the ratio that we get to, if not more hatchery fish to wild fish at Willamette Falls. We do get a summary each year of the number of fish that we expect to get the next year. And so we have a prediction of about 52 or 3,000 spring Chinook coming back in 2025. We had a prediction this year of just over 50,000. You can see we ended up right near 40,000. Usually it's not a bad relationship. 2023, evidently there were a lot of oddball things that happened we did not predict very well, over predicted by quite a bit. So part of the reason comes from these age classes that, again, jacks are like Coho. Jacks, which are the age 3 here of the Chinook, do a pretty good job of predicting the 4-year-olds. And then the 4-year-olds, with some caveats, will do a pretty good job of predicting the 5s. And so you can see in 2023 that there was a series of these are the ages that came back. This jack prediction of almost 2,000 jacks predicted a bigger number than the 2,300 4-year-olds that came back. So anyway, things break down in those models, and like they say, all models are wrong. So, but sometimes they're helpful. One of the things I want to point out here is that most of our fish coming back to the Willamette are age 4. And that's a big reason for that, is that most of the fish are hatchery fish, and those hatchery fish tend to come back at early ages compared to a wild fish. And so the age 5 fish here would be a higher percentage of wild, and the age 6 fish are even higher percentage wild. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about big fish. This is kind of a summary of the McKenzie River hatchery run. We did have a pretty normal return in 2024 as a whole for the Willamette. But the McKenzie run did not come back very well. We had no water in either McKenzie or Lieberg hatchery, and so we had no ability to capture fish that were coming back as hatchery fish that might have come back into the hatchery, smelling the salmon that are in the hatchery. And we also had a very low 5-year-old return because of the release that we made out of McKenzie or Lieberg hatchery in September 2020 during the holiday farm fire. Those fish did not return at a very high rate at all. So basically we had we could see that we had really low numbers of hatchery fish out there, and we weren't going to make our brood collection. So it caused us to have to close the season in early July. And even still, we only met about 50% of our broodstock needs for eggs for the next generation of hatchery fish. We did end up having to dewater Lieberg hatchery this year because of not having DEQ permit for the water that we release out of there. And we ended up taking all the brood fish out, putting them various locations, took the sturgeon out, released a bunch of them into the McKenzie. We took some over to the McKenzie Discovery Center, moved all the catchable trout out to Willamette Hatchery. But what it left us was no pond to hold Chinook. So when we were running our fish sorter up there at Lieberg Dam, we didn't have a place to put Chinook to hold them until we could move them over to Minto, where we were holding them until spawning. So we had a little interesting dilemma, and get that to move. There it goes. So we built the Chinook Chalet, as we called it, at the fish sorter. And this was kind of a co-op project. The hatchery manager at Lieberg, Eric Whitholm, had said, well, why don't we just get a big tank from a dumpster thing and put them in that? And we kind of went, oh, yeah, right. And actually, Santa Pac worked with us. We put a water supply on this thing, and recirculating water. We held up to 70 fish in this thing this summer, and it was a great alternative. And this is Jeremy put this slide together, but he said, got to remember, it's called a garbage can, not a garbage cannot. So we may end up using this thing again this year, as it turns out. I gave you a heads up on this last time, but basically our percentage of hatchery fish on spawning grounds was 10.8% as we had it preliminarily, with the fish going over Lieberg Dam. We got the final numbers in from Luke Whitman. What they do is they take the carcass recoveries, find out how many adipose fin mark fish there are there. On the ones that they can't figure out if they're ad marked or not, they pull otoliths. Actually, they pull otoliths from all of them, but from the otolith, it's like a tree ring. We mark the otolith. It's an ear bone, and with temperature, and it puts a little pattern on the otolith, and we can tell if it's a hatchery fish or not because of that. And once you got all that done, the actual PHOS that we had in the McKenzie this year was less than 5%. So pretty good. Again, this is our PHOS target, and these are potential PHOS. These are just the numbers that we get back to Lieberg Dam. That's the PHOS, the potential PHOS that we have. These are the fish numbers that we actually removed each year with the fish sorter and the fish trap. And this is where PHOS would have been if we didn't have that fish sorter in there. So, and if you look at our fish runs through the years, you can see how many hatchery fish. These are the kind of brownish ones. And then as you get to 22, 23, 24, it's they kind of go away. Okay, this is the last thing I was going to talk about. Any questions on the previous one?
Yeah, I just have this is fascinating, and it looks like you got a ton of really good data. Have you guys thought about what's going to happen with this data once the dam goes away and there's not the ability to count?
Yeah, we thought about it a lot. We won't have a fish counting station per se. And so we'll have to count on numbers off of the spawning ground surveys. Again, let me go back. So this was, we used these numbers here to calculate the actual number of spawning fish in the McKenzie. And it's an after the fact thing. We know how many fish are coming through with the fish ladders being recorded in on the fishways, and so we have real time access to the data. Whereas with this information, we have to go out and collect that data, collect the carcasses off the spawning grounds, count the reds, and then do the aging of those fish to get our estimates of spawning in the McKenzie. We can still do it. It won't be near as easy.
And the reason I bring that up, Jeff, and to the rest of the people on the committee or the council, is that was one of the considerations that we had, one of the inputs that we put into our heads when we were trying to make the decision of whether to decommission or keep the dam in service, was one that the attributes that Jeff and OD F&W were able to glom from having that there, and the ability to separate between native and those. And so I just want people to know that that was one of the considerations that we took, at least myself and other people on the board took, when we were making that decision to decommission the dam. And I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Jeff, can I follow up on John's question there?
Sure, Arlen.
So looking at the charts you just showed, for the last 3 years, the number of hatchery fish that got above the dam were obviously much lower, which is a much better situation than it ever has been in history here. But when the dam goes away, if the number of hatchery releases stay the same, then those numbers that you're showing over on the right side of the bar is what you'd expect to be getting, right?
Yeah, we're going to work that into our management plan for the future, though, Arlen. That if you end up with an inability to remove fish from the McKenzie River, to remove hatchery fish, then we won't be able to meet the targets that we want to meet, and we won't have a hatchery program for spring Chinook in the McKenzie. It's as simple as that. We will probably still have those spring Chinook reared, and they will go someplace else because they are part of a mitigation package that the Corps of Engineers is on the hook for, but they probably won't go into the McKenzie.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that when I've talked to you about it before, that you had said something like that. I just wanted to follow up and see if that sounds like that's still what your thought is.
Yes.
Jeff, what about the status of water and Leeburg hatchery, short and long term?
It's a responsibility of the Corps of Engineers to provide water to Leeburg and McKenzie hatcheries. They have not come up with a plan that is feasible to, or even they haven't even talked about it to speak of, and so we're still waiting. And there are options out there. People have talked about pumping water. I don't think there's a hatchery manager anywhere in the world that would want to have pumped water versus gravity fed water. So that's our preference would be to find a new water intake site and be able to pipe the water down to the hatchery. If that's not possible, there are other alternatives alternatives that have been discussed. So they might not be on the McKenzie River.
Thank you.
Any others?
Anything about
Okay.
lamprey you want to tell us, as long as you got a picture of them?
Yeah. So this is like the this is the cool story. So here's the left bank fish ladder. This is what's called a half ice arbor fishway. And you notice that it has an overflow and an orifice. And so the fish can either go through the orifice or over the top. This orifice is got a lot of head on it and really moves, but it is passable. This is the right bank fish ladder at Leeburg, and it is what's called a vertical slot ladder. You notice there's no orifice, it's just a slot all the way down, and it's the amount of water going through that that raises the head in each pool, and then the pool of the next one down pushes back against that, and it makes for a really easy passable fish ladder. And this one was actually designed for lamprey. Well, in addition to other fish. When we were running the sorter, we found out very quickly that we can't have both fish ladders running without having a sorter on both fish ladders. And so I'm going to move the dial here. So this is the lamprey counts that we had over the years. You know, here in 2002, we had a big run of lamprey, comparatively, like I think it was like 225 fish. And then we had a bunch of years. Notice this 2021 year. We dewatered the right bank fish ladder in 2021 to get more water into the or to get more fish into the sorter on the left bank ladder. And again, our assumption was that if you provide one spot for the fish to go through, that's where they'll go. That worked with the salmonids, and evidently it did not work for lamprey. They did not like going up the left bank fish ladder. So the next year, we went ahead and built this grate, a couple of grates. We didn't build it, Koffler did. But this was a picture of it when it broke and we had it repaired. But this is about 1.25 inches across this gap. And lamprey can go through that like they're just swimming upriver. But Chinook and steelhead can't. So that worked really well. And the next year, we had a record number. We had almost 250 lamprey came through the fish ladder. And almost every one of these came through the right bank fish ladder with the grates in there. So it worked really, really well. And then in 2023, you know, we had 125 or so lamprey, not a bad number. And then we had 2024. And we have no idea what happened here, but we have a lot of lamprey that have gone through Leeburg Dam this past year. Why they went through, I don't know, but it's just really cool having them go through. And I'm glad Kate's on the call because that's we've talked about this before, but we've got a lot of habitat up there that these lamprey can go into now, and I'm really tickled to see them go there. Now we had 851, but we might have had more. this guy kind of went through and took a look around. Then he decided, hey, I got me a lamprey.
No,
Whoa.
We didn't count that one.
Wow.
So 852 at least would have been up there. So anyway, that's all I had for you guys tonight.
Jeff, do you think that the huge number that went up in 2024 provided a lot more progeny going down? How many years does it take from when they leave the system until they come back?
That's a great question because it takes them 3 or 4 years in the sediments before
Right.
they migrate downstream, and it can be even 6 or 7 years. So yeah, there's some great habitat upstream from Lieber Dam now. One of the things we were talking about the other day is that, well, maybe there's such great habitat up there now, and there's so many amicetes up there that the pheromones are going crazy, and the lamprey are coming back in bigger numbers.
Yeah.
And we don't know. It's there's such a mystery fish, and we just smile when we get a bunch of them coming back. So.
Well, we've got time for probably one more question. 2 if we hurry. All right. Well, Jeff, this was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Good.
For a January online meeting. These are always interesting. Learn something every time, and obviously with the with some of the guests here, there's a lot of interest in this information. So, really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Sure.
Great.